Welcome back to our channel, where we uncover hidden truths and undisclosed narratives about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and the royal family. Today's breaking update is explosive: Prince William and Princess Anne's shocking move against Queen Camilla. An insider claims that the top working royals gathered at Balmoral to debate nothing less than the future of the monarchy, and William's bold new proposal to restructure royal operations. According to the source, William presented evidence that Camilla had broken royal protocol and gone against the late Queen's wishes. But the real turning point came when Princess Anne revealed proof that the late Queen's directives concerning titles and the roles of senior family members had been deliberately overlooked. This revelation sent shockwaves through the room and intensified the already growing conflict. The Windsor recording, a 15-year-old secret that resurfaced at the worst possible moment, became the final blow. It exposed how deeply the late Queen's orders had been ignored, undermining the current leadership. And in an unprecedented move that has reverberated around the globe, Queen Camilla was officially stripped of her royal duties and departed Buckingham Palace in disgrace. Stay tuned as we reveal every detail behind this royal power shift. The remarkable downfall of Queen Camilla began with a revelation no one expected. On June 10, 2025, during an opulent gala filled with foreign journalists, dignitaries, and senior courtiers, the famously composed Princess Anne shattered decades of silence. It was the launch of her bold new power campaign, and the night Camilla's carefully built reality crumbled. Before a stunned audience, Princess Anne unveiled a trove of undeniable evidence centered around a clandestine audio recording from Camilla's wedding day to then Prince Charles. The recording, buried for 15 years, captured Camilla's own voice, admitting that her marriage was not founded on love, but on strategy, a calculated move to seize the secrets and power of the royal family. Anne's disclosure didn't stop there. She presented witness testimonies and incriminating internal documents that left no room for doubt. In an instant, the House of Windsor was thrown into its greatest crisis since King Edward VIII's abdication. This is not merely a scandal. It is the story of repressed ambition, of staff who carried silent burdens, and of a princess who risked everything to stop what she saw as a covert coup. A secret that lay dormant for 15 years has returned with the force of a storm, and it may forever alter the future of the monarchy. April 9th, 2005. Windsor. A day draped in Britishness. The skies were a muted grey above Windsor Castle, yet the streets pulsed with celebratory anticipation. This was no ordinary wedding. It was the long-awaited union of Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles, a relationship that had weathered scandal, heartbreak, and decades of relentless public scrutiny. But unlike a fairy tale, this marriage was a matter of tradition and reconciliation, a calculated attempt to turn a controversial past into an acceptable future. Inside the Guildhall, away from the waving flags and cheering crowds, the atmosphere was taut with an intensity the cameras never showed. Prince Charles, immaculate in his mourning suit, wore a rare lightness, almost buoyant, as if this ritual might finally cleanse the shadows of his past. By his side, Camilla Parker Bowles radiated poise and self-assurance. Her smile, polished yet deliberate, masked the deeper story, and behind her shimmering eyes lay something more than pride. To many, it was joy. To a few, it was the quiet satisfaction of a plan coming to fruition. What no one knew then, what the world would only discover 15 years later, was that beneath the vows and velvet, a conspiracy was already in motion. Among the royal attendants, the mood was markedly subdued. Princess Anne, ever the realist, observed the ceremony with her calm, analytical gaze. Dressed in a modest grey-blue coat, she did not see harmony or healing, but rather a carefully choreographed performance designed to pacify the nation. Nearby, Princes William and Harry fulfilled their roles with a strained civility, their gestures polite, but their expressions heavy, revealing the quiet rift between themselves and their new stepmother. Even the seasoned royal advisors, masters of neutrality, carried a somber gravity, their faces reflecting the uneasy pulse of public opinion that pressed against Windsor's ancient stone walls. Yet the true drama of the day unfolded far from the cameras and crowds. In the bride's private preparation chamber, Camilla stood before a mirror, adjusting her veil. Her hands trembled ever so slightly, but her eyes betrayed no nerves. Instead, They gleamed with the focus of a strategist on the verge of victory, a woman who had waited decades for this moment. It was here, in this fragile pause, that George Windsor, a quiet, middle-aged servant with nearly 20 years of palace service, entered the room. What he witnessed, and what he would later preserve, would change the course of royal history. He carried a small notepad and a compact microcassette recorder, the tool he used to capture reminders so that no detail of his duties ever slipped through the cracks. Amid the subdued bustle of last-minute preparations, George stepped quietly into the chamber to deliver the customary alert. 10 minutes remain, ma'am, he said with a courteous bow. As he spoke, his thumb brushed against the recorder in his jacket pocket. A soft click, barely audible, armed the device. In that unobserved instant, history veered onto a dangerous, uncharted path. Camilla drew in a steadying breath, turned from the mirror and lifted a half-finished glass of champagne from the nearby table. She took a slow, deliberate sip. When the door closed behind them, sealing her alone with the loyal servant, the polished facade she had paraded for the world dissolved. Her face hardened into one of cold, deliberate calculation. When she spoke, her low voice sliced the silence like glass. "Do you know, George, why I am truly joining this family?" She began speaking less to George and more to the reflection before her. The recorder in Windsor's pocket captured every word with chilling fidelity. "It is not love that drives me, and certainly not the tedium of rituals such as these." Her eyes locked upon her own image in the glass. "I want every secret hidden in these walls. Their secrets are my strength. Once I possess them, none in this family will ever have the power to wound me." A silence followed, weighted with the enormity of her vow. Then, leaning closer to the mirror, her voice fell into a razor-edged whisper. "This power shall be mine." George Windsor froze. His head lifted slightly, eyes widening in disbelief so sharp it stole the breath from his chest. A man practiced in invisibility, he stood rooted, seeing and hearing yet wishing to perceive neither. This wasn't just some casual remark, it was a straight-up declaration of war. Camilla, either blind to his presence or simply not caring, carried on with her icy monologue. Charles is nothing but a portal, but an essential one," she hissed. "I want him to slip inside, gather every data record, and drag out the conversations that have been buried for years." Her words hit like daggers. She made it crystal clear. Once she had the full picture, the entire royal family would be hers to control. The press and the public wouldn't dare make a sound, even as the faint thunder of the military band outside grew louder, a signal that the grand event was closing in. Windsor burned with the urge to run, to bolt from the room before hearing another poisonous secret. But his body betrayed him. His legs refused to move, heavy like iron chains. Camilla stepped forward again, her voice sharp with unshakable resolve. "They believe today ends the scandal, but for me, this is just the beginning. Soon, I will own every one of their secrets, and no one will ever force me to bow my head again." Just then, the door creaked open. A young assistant slipped in, announcing the ceremonial procession was ready. In an instant, Camilla's entire aura shifted. The ruthless schemer vanished, replaced by a glowing, bride-like figure. With one swift move, she lifted her veil, straightened her posture, and swept out of the room, leaving George Windsor trembling in her shadow. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, his sweaty palm clutching the notebook, completely unaware that the tiny device in his pocket had just become the most dangerous weapon in the entire kingdom. Later that night, long after the celebrations had ended, Windsor crept back to his modest staff quarters, the weight of the day pressing hard on his shoulders. He sat at his small desk, planning to erase the day's recordings, clearing the cassette for tomorrow's duties. But the moment he hit playback, expecting nothing more than muffled background chatter, Camilla's venomous voice slashed through the silence. Her words filled the cramped room with a chilling clarity, each sentence crawling under his skin. He froze, unable to breathe, replaying her confession until the blood drained from his face. This wasn't ambition anymore, it was a cold-blooded conspiracy. All night, he paced the narrow room, torn between loyalty to the crown and the creeping dread for his own life and the safety of his family. By dawn, Windsor had made his choice. He would reveal the truth, but fate beat him to it. A pounding knock shook his door with force. Standing outside was Mrs. Parker Bowles herself, demanding a private meeting in her lavish new apartment. Gone was the gentle bride of yesterday. In her place stood a woman carved in ice, her gaze sharp as a blade, her presence colder than steel. "I suspect you overheard something yesterday, George," Camilla said, her voice dripping with a dangerously sweet tone. "I trust you're a reasonable man. I also know your family is struggling. Isn't your daughter unwell? Perhaps your home is on the edge of repossession?" Her words sliced into him, leaving Windsor mute, his throat dry as sand. He stood there stripped of any power, utterly trapped. Camilla leaned closer, her tone shifting into something smooth, almost silky, and all the more terrifying. "I can make it all disappear. Your daughter will receive the best care. Your debts will vanish. All I ask in return is silence, eternal silence. Because silence, George, comes with rewards." She didn't stop there. "Stay loyal to me, and your family will live in peace and comfort. But if you even think of defying me, I can't promise what might happen to them." It was a flawless checkmate. Caught between his duty to the crown and the fierce pull of protecting his family, George Windsor gave in. Soon after, the debts vanished like smoke. His daughter received constant, top-quality medical care, but the price was steep. His voice, forever locked away. He buried the incriminating microcassette deep inside a tin box, hidden at the bottom of a drawer, a ticking time bomb he prayed would never be uncovered. For 15 long years, he lived like a ghost, haunted day and night by the secret that chained him in silence. He carried the weight of hidden authority, and as 15 years slipped by, the United Kingdom transformed. So did the royals. After Queen Elizabeth II's passing, Charles rose as King Charles III, with Camilla crowned at his side as Queen. Her shift in the public eye was nothing short of a public relations masterpiece. Camilla reinvented herself into a polished benefactor, her smile warm, her demeanour endlessly gracious. The woman once scorned as the other woman suddenly appeared to be an indispensable pillar of the monarchy. But behind the palace walls, a darker story was brewing. She wasn't content with being a supportive spouse. Camilla was carefully building an empire of her own. Piece by piece, she crafted a web of loyal allies, planting them in the monarchy's most sensitive positions. Long-serving staff tied to the old guard were pushed aside, forced into early retirement, shuffled into meaningless roles, or quietly erased from influence. Her moves were quiet, calculated, and deadly effective. The silent coup reached its peak with the unveiling of her so-called modernization program. On the surface, it was sold as a bold 21st century reform plan, cutting costs, streamlining operations, and polishing the monarchy's reputation. But insiders whispered it was really about one thing: power. The launch date was locked in, June 10th, a day that promised to reshape the crown forever. By 2025, a sweeping reorganization plan shook the palace. The blueprint was simple but ruthless: consolidate power. Key functions, budgets, communications, and most dangerously, direct access to the royal archives were all set to be absorbed into one brand new office. And who would sit at the top of this empire? None other than Queen Camilla herself. This was the final stroke in her long game, the move that would hand her full control of the monarchy and the very secrets she had been hungry for since her wedding day. But in climbing toward the peak of her power, Camilla made the one mistake that would haunt her. She forgot to clean up the ghosts from her past. Every person she had used, silenced, or pushed aside became unfinished business. George Windsor, the quiet keeper of her darkest confession for 15 years, suddenly became dead weight in her eyes. One bleak morning, a letter arrived. Termination of service, effective immediately. His position was eliminated, his role erased with the cold stamp of bureaucracy. Worse still, the financial lifeline that had kept his family afloat all these years vanished overnight. No warning, no explanation, just gone. The message couldn't be clearer. He was no longer needed. A disposable pawn kicked off the royal board. Sitting in his modest, mortgaged home on the edge of Berkshire, Windsor's hands shook as he clutched the letter. 15 years of pent-up fury ignited inside him, hardening into icy resolve. He had honored their deal. He had swallowed his silence. Yet now, betrayed and discarded, he realized loyalty to the Queen had bought him nothing but treachery. The pawn was ready to fight back against the Queen. Another figure within the palace walls began to grow uneasy. Princess Anne, always careful to keep a respectful distance from her brother's wife while devoting herself to a grueling schedule of royal duties, could no longer ignore the shifting atmosphere inside the castle. She noticed trusted faces from her parents' reign quietly disappear, replaced by fresh aides whose loyalty belonged solely to Camilla. Anne's sharp eyes caught what others overlooked. At a royal dinner, she overheard whispers of secret meetings and caught sight of discreet envelopes slipping into the wrong hands. She noticed the deliberate exclusion of long-serving, faithful advisors, people who had given decades of service, suddenly cut out of guest lists, erased as if they had never existed. The monarchy she had defended with her life was rotting from the inside, reshaped into something unrecognizable. Her instincts, honed through a lifetime of palace watchfulness, told her this wasn't just political maneuvering. Camilla's rise to power was tied to something much deeper, stretching back years. The memory came rushing back. Camilla on her wedding day, that unmistakable glint of greed flashing in her eyes, a hunger she could never disguise. That vision hardened Anne's resolve. The Princess Royal quietly launched her own investigation, calling upon the vast web of trusted connections she had built over decades. She met discreetly with retired staff, gathering their stories of being cast aside. One former housekeeper even revealed the chilling sight of documents being shredded under cover of night, evidence disappearing into the flames before dawn. A retired private secretary revealed a chilling detail. Camilla had deliberately dismantled the old advisory system piece by piece, and in every account, one name kept surfacing: George Windsor. He was described as a man once deeply entangled with Camilla's affairs, mysteriously controlled for years, and then just as suddenly discarded without explanation. The full story was hazy, but one thing was clear: George held a missing piece of the puzzle. He was the link Camilla had worked so hard to bury, the one witness she had tried to silence and erase. His silence had been bought, his loyalty twisted, yet his existence still carried the weight of secrets too dangerous to ignore. On a bleak afternoon, Princess Anne made the drive to Berkshire herself. The crumbling state of Windsor's modest home told her everything she needed to know. This was a man ruined, abandoned, left behind by the very system he had once protected. She found him sitting on the cold doorstep, broken, clutching the termination letter that had destroyed the fragile life he'd managed to hold together. When their eyes met, words weren't needed. There was an unspoken agreement. It was time to talk. "Mr. Windsor," Anne said firmly, her voice low but unshakable inside the chilly little house. And at last, Windsor let the truth pour out, the secret he had carried for 15 long years. For 15 years, he had carried the weight with shaking hands. The memory of that wedding day burned in his mind. The venomous words he had captured, the threat that sealed his silence, and the endless fear that followed. "I erred, Your Highness," Windsor whispered, his voice cracking with grief. "I thought I was protecting my family, but all I did was help her rise higher. My silence made her untouchable." He swallowed hard, his eyes brimming with shame. "Now she discards people like me as if we never mattered." Princess Anne listened, her face grave, her voice calm yet cutting. "Do you still have it? The recording?" she asked. Windsor slowly rose and moved to an old wooden cabinet. From a hidden drawer, he pulled out a battered tin box. Inside lay the tiny machine that had haunted his every breath. With trembling fingers, he placed the microcassette recorder before the princess. "I plan to carry this to my grave," he confessed. "But if I stay quiet now, then I'm part of her plan to consume this family. I won't let that happen." Anne lifted the recorder, its weight sinking into her palm. Not because of metal and tape, but because of the dangerous truth it contained. She carried it with her, her heart pounding, and once inside her car, she pressed play. The old machine crackled to life, and Camilla's damning voice spilled into the air like a ghost returned from the past. Camilla's voice, youthful, cold, and razor-sharp, spilled from the recorder like a ghost from the past. 6 deadly words cut through the silence. "All this power will be mine." That single line, frozen in time, was now Anne's weapon. Yet she knew one tape alone could be brushed aside, dismissed as a forgery or a fabrication. She needed undeniable proof. Over the following weeks, Anne built her case with painstaking precision. She tracked down 12 former courtiers and advisors who had been forced out, each one signing statements that revealed how they'd been pushed aside. She quietly contracted a forensic accounting firm who traced the suspicious flow of money, royal charity funds funneled into private companies linked to Camilla's inner circle. The final blow came from a source still buried deep inside the palace walls. Through them, Anne obtained the crown jewel of evidence, a full copy of Camilla's power consolidation plan, complete with her handwritten notes and signature. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the monarchy to its core. June 10th, 2025, Buckingham Palace's Great Hall glittered with grandeur. This was Camilla's crowning moment, her reign's pinnacle. Draped in a pearl-hued gown and crowned with a dazzling tiara, she radiated absolute command. At King Charles's side, she stepped to the podium as thunderous applause erupted around her. Camilla raised her chin and declared with icy elegance, "The new power initiative does not aim to displace anyone." She spoke with measured gravity, her tone polished with cultivated earnestness. "This initiative aims to fortify our foundations and bind us into a stronger, more unified royal family. Today, I stand before you not merely as your queen, but as the harbinger of a new era, one defined by clarity and resolve." Thunderous applause swelled through the great hall, but as it reached its peak, the towering doors at the back creaked open. The sound cut through the ovation like a blade. Heads turned. Murmurs rippled across the crowd. It was Princess Anne. "Before this nation is promised a so-called new age of reform," she declared, her voice ringing through the chamber without the aid of a microphone, "the royal family and the people of Britain must first hear the truth." Camilla's smile faltered, the composure in her eyes tightening into a flicker of unease. "You are undermining a historic occasion," she hissed. "This is neither the time nor the place." Anne did not blink, her gaze held steady, unwavering. "On the contrary," she replied coldly, "this is the only time and the only place. We cannot step into a new age built on deception and conspiracy." What followed was not a speech, but a public unmasking, a slow, deliberate dismantling of Queen Camilla's carefully constructed image. Anne summoned George Windsor to the stage. His frame trembled, but his resolve held. In halting words, he revealed his story, the silencing, the threats, the secrets he had borne for 15 years. And then came the weapon. Anne produced the recorder. The hall froze. The tape hissed to life. Camilla's voice, younger yet unmistakably cold, filled the vaulted chamber. "All this power will be mine." The words cracked through the silence like thunder. A simultaneous gasp rippled through the audience, the weight of revelation pressing down on the room like stone. Camilla's expression hardened, but her voice rang out, resolute. She tried to dismiss the recording as nothing more than a crude forgery, a superficial ruse. Anne did not flinch. "We possess the original device," she said evenly, her words slicing through the air. "It has been examined by independent forensic specialists. It is unaltered, authentic." The silence was suffocating. Then Anne moved methodically to her next strike. First came the signed statements, 12 in total. The dismissed courtiers, each attesting to intimidation, manipulation, and forced exile from the institution they had loyally served. Next, the financial records. Meticulous ledgers revealing the quiet siphoning of millions from royal charities into private companies linked to Camilla's confidants. Gasps spread like fire through the crowd. The atmosphere grew heavier with each revelation. The great hall itself seemed to tighten around the gathering. Cameras clicked. Not a single cough disturbed the stillness. King Charles sat motionless, his face etched with disbelief and quiet devastation. His eyes, fixed on Camilla, told a story no words could capture. Finally, Anne revealed her magnum opus. From her folder, she drew the document, the New Power Initiative, charts of personnel replacement, plans for archive acquisition, and at the bottom, in unmistakable ink, the signature of Queen Camilla herself. "This is not modernization," Anne declared, her voice resonant, unwavering. "This is a coup, a covert seizure of the monarchy itself. And today, before this nation, I reveal it for what it truly is." The hall erupted. Reporters shouted over one another, their cameras exploding in frantic flashes. Courtiers whispered in horror, advisors slumped into their chairs. Camilla rose, her face contorted with fury. "This is slander!" she cried, her voice trembling with rage. "A spectacle designed to humiliate me." But her words were swallowed by the roar of voices, the crackle of shutters, and the rising swell of public outrage. For the first time in decades, the Queen stood not as untouchable, but as exposed. The allies she had cultivated over years began to vanish one by one. Advisors who once swore loyalty now slipped quietly from her side, avoiding her gaze, severing all ties. In her hour of greatest need, Camilla stood utterly alone. The days that followed blurred into a haze of crisis meetings and damning headlines. Every newspaper carried the same story. The New Power Initiative terminated. Behind closed doors, the Royal Council convened. Their verdict was swift, merciless. Queen Camilla was to be permanently suspended from all public duties and stripped of her royal privileges. The order was final. Her departure from Buckingham Palace carried none of the grandeur that had once defined her reign. No ceremonial procession, no formal farewell. Instead, she was escorted quietly to a waiting vehicle, a plain, unremarkable car that carried her away in silence. Its destination, Clarence House. The residence that had once been her sanctuary was now her gilded prison, a place of ornate confinement. King Charles did not go with her. He remained at Buckingham Palace, a monarch left to reckon with betrayal, not from a rival, but from the woman closest to him. In that moment, the magnitude of her fall crystallized. The jewels, the titles, the reverence, all had evaporated. What remained was a woman stripped of power, burdened only with the shadow of her own ambition. The mirror reflected no queen, only a woman stripped of the authority she had clawed after for decades. The first days passed in frantic denial, Camilla pacing the rooms of Clarence House, her mind racing for a way back. But as the headlines shifted and the palace began the long process of reconstruction, stillness settled in. The phone no longer rang, no meetings awaited her. No staff came to obey her command. The power she had once held was gone, as though it had never existed. On the fifth night, she locked herself away in her study. The carefully drafted plans for her reign lay scattered across the floor, lifeless remnants of a dream. And there, in the suffocating silence, the woman who had schemed to dominate an empire broke at last. She collapsed to the floor, her body shaking with sobs, not of fury, but of something far worse, profound loneliness. She wept for the desire that had consumed her, for the illusion of power that had dissolved into nothing, and for the final haunting truth that at her moment of absolute ruin, no one remained by her side. A chapter had ended. The story of Queen Camilla stands as a chilling warning within the House of Windsor that the ruthless pursuit of power leads not to a throne, but to an empty room, where the only sound left is the echo of your own downfall. Thank you for watching. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the untold truths of royalty. Until next time, goodbye for now.